Hello. So how do you plan for setting up a new network in a new place or extending your existing network with Unifi? This is one of the things that I've been sort of struggling with, or playing with at least, for the last 12 months. And I've discovered there's something called Unifi Design Studio, which I thought I will take you through. It's a very cool online tool where you kind of draw out your place, your house, your shed, whatever it is that you're trying to cover in network. And then you can add access point and see where the coverage goes based on your walls, your doorways, those sort of things. And also you can put up cameras and see the angle that they cover. You can put up cable trays, where the cable runs through the place, all sorts of things. So I thought that would be a really cool video to try and show you how it helped me at my place using this to cover all the little bits that I didn't know was sort of in poor coverage. Now this is a guide only, and take it with a grain of salt, but it's a pretty good tool and it gives you a really good idea of where to start and what to do as a first step at least. So let's get into it. I'll show you what to do. So here's what we're going to build in the Unifi Design Center, or Design Studio as I like to call it, but it is called Design Center. And but to get to here, there's a few steps that we'll go through. I just wanted to start out with showing you that this is pretty cool. But before we get to this point, you're going to have a floor plan. Now, I didn't have a floor plan of my house, so I went to floorplanner.com. Pretty obvious name, but it's a really, really good tool. I measured my entire house, every single edge and angle and everything else, and I then put it into the floorplanner.com tool here, and you can see here's all the rooms. Everything is to scale. And then I paid about $8, I think, or something, all up, $8 US to use this, and I can then export it in high definition as well. So once you have your floor plan, now you can just use anything. You can use just a scan of the one you have from your house or whatever it is. You don't have to make your own. I just didn't have one, so I did that. Once you have your floor plan, you go to the Unifi Design Center, which is design.ui.com, and you then log in with your Ubiquiti account. If you don't have one, you can create one. So sign in, and it then gives you a dashboard of all of the projects that you have. Now, I already have made the one that I showed to start with, but we are going to recreate it. So I'm going to go up here to the right and say add a new project, and then you put in all your names. So I'm going to call this the YouTube design example, and the building location, you can put in your location. So I'm going to put in Victoria in Australia. You can put it as accurate or as not as you want. And then you can use your product preference. So this, I'll show you what this means, but you can basically choose whether you want to see products from Unifi or Ubiquiti by value or performance. Now I'm going to leave it at value. I'll show you how that works. And then there's the building type. There's home, which is the one we're going to use in this case. And because obviously Unifi has product that can cover thousands of connections, we also have stadium, office, school, hotel, and other. So I'm going to use home. Now my building is between 200 and 500 square meters, so I'm going to choose that. And building users, I'm going to choose less than 100 because there's not many people living here, even though my network is probably a bit over the top. Click next. And now you need to choose which solutions you would like to have as options that you can add to your Design Center project. So I'm going to choose the Wi-Fi network, I'm going to choose surveillance, and I'm not going to choose the Unifi access or building security because that is not in my house, that is my office. I do have another video on that I'll put a link to as well. And I don't have Unifi Talk yet either, so I'm not going to choose those because I'm not going to need them. And then down here, this says Unifi Design Center powered by Dream Machine. It is kind of set up for you to use the UDM Pro, as are most solutions currently for Unifi products. So I'm going to click Create Project. And the first thing you need to do is add a floor plan. Now, if you don't have one, you can use the sample plan, but it's not as much fun as using your real one. So I'm going to add a floor plan, the one I just used before. I'm going to upload a floor plan. And that's here. Open that up. And then when you have your floor plan, you can then give it a name. So I'm going to call this Homestead Floor Plan, because that's the floor plan of the homestead. Ta-da. Create your floor plan. Essentially, it's importing the photo or the image. So then it's you have a floor plan. Now it is worth having this in relatively high definition as an image, because it makes it easier to draw the walls on it like we're about to do. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to set the ceiling height in meters. So I know that my ceiling height is 2.8 meters, roughly. It varies, but we set that for now. Floor plan scale. So you need to find a length, you know how long is. So I know this particular piece of wall from there to there, there we go, is 8 meters. So I'll save that, because that now means that the design center knows how large your scale is. Now I think you can see here 1 to 86 pixels. So that's my floor plan scale. So you can always change that if you need to, but that's pretty good to get that accurate, because it gives you a much better idea of where to place devices. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to actually add all the walls. Now you would think, hopefully, that in the future when you import a floor plan like this, it would just know what the outer walls is, but the design center does not. So you need to go to the building, the hammer icon here, and you need to put up outer walls. And this is the interesting bit here, where you then draw all of the walls, but I'll be right back. Like that. So now we have all the outer walls created here, and you can see that the outer wall is considered to be brick, concrete and other heavy materials, and it gives you a decibel range of how much interference that gives you. Now these are all estimates. I don't actually have brick outer walls, I have wood, so it'll be different, but it gives you a fair idea. Again, this is all a tool to get started. It's not going to be an accurate representation of where your signal is, but it will give you a really good idea. Now then I'm going to choose my inner walls, which is wood panel or other light partition, and again, bear with me while I put that in. Alright, that's all the inner walls. Now that can be quite tedious, and but it is important that you get them relatively right, because it does affect the signal in the house. So I think actually I've just missed an outer wall here. Let me just fix that up. That does happen. There we go. And there's one there as well. No, there isn't. We've got to do an inner wall from there to there. So I just want to make sure I get it right. So those are all the walls, and now I have an idea, and actually I can go down here to the speaking of idea, I can put the plan opacity, I can scale that out, and you can sort of see what you've got in terms of room, and that looks pretty good. Again, it's not 100% accurate, but it's accurate enough so that it gives me a representation of what I can expect in terms of coverage. Alright, so that takes a little while. Luckily, through the magic of editing, you didn't have to look at me for too long drawing on a map. So now let's get into the bit more interesting stuff. So the first thing I want to do is I want to place where my main rack is. Where is my main, switch and setup that everything comes out of. So if I go to the floor plan here, and on the wires there's actually racks and accessories. Now I only have a 6 RU rack, I do not have a 24, but I'm going to place a 24 in here anyway, because that's the only one I can choose, and just to give you an idea of what that does. So it's in the cupboard over here. I'm going to place that. If I now go to racks up here in the top left, I can then click on the rack, and you can see that there's a representation here of all the 24 slots, and Unifi has been kind enough to put the UDM Pro in there for me from the start. So, and that's fine, because I do have a UDM Pro. If you do not, you can change this. Now this is auto mode. I'm going to take this off so I can add my own things to the rack. Now I do have a Dream Machine Pro, so that's fine, they can stay in there. And then my switch that I have in this particular location is the Unifi 24 PoE switch here, not the Pro. So I can add that, and that'll then get added to my rack. And then the idea of adding these things to the rack is that, for me anyway, you can see how many ports have you used. That's kind of obvious because you can just go look at it, but also how much power is it using? How much power is this cabinet using? And that's handy if you need to put in like a UPS, you know, an uninterruptible power supply, or other things that you might want to monitor the power consumption of. So that's the rack. I'm not going to do much more with the rack in this particular video, but I kind of like putting it in there. It makes it kind of neat and easy to explain where things go. Alright, so the UDM Pro is already placed, so that's the routing part of the solution. Now I want to place the switching, which I did. That's the 24 PoE switch. And now it's kind of time to, well, place the access points where they would be. Now I'm going to put them in as I have them in the house, so that I can see where there are some blind spots. If you were looking at a new solution, you would then look to put in the access points where you think they have the best coverage. So I go back to the floor planner option here, and down here under routing, which we've already done, is UDM Pro, switching is the switches obviously, and now under access points. Now remember at the start I talked about whether you want to see value or performance to start with. That is simply this toggle up here. So value will kind of show you whatever Unifi wants to sell you the most, I think. That's what it looks like to me on this. And performance kind of shows, well, more things. Like you can always go show more. So, but I think both of them are kind of, they show the devices in different ways. Now I'm going to first of all put in my long range access point. I've got two of those, so I click on that, and there's one right here. And then I have another one which is actually up here in my lounge room. So I got two of those. Alright, so that's the long range access point that I have two of. Then I want to place my Nano HD access point. Then I have to go back to value. I'm not sure why they've made this choice, but under value is where the Nano HD is. That is not under performance, even though this is one of the most performant devices that I have. Very little, very cool. I have one here in the bedroom, roughly about there. And then I have an outdoor mesh access point, which is that one there. That sits kind of like just outside here up on the roof. If you want to know more about where I've placed all these things, I do have another video where I go through my entire setup on the farm, not just for the homestead, but you get sort of an idea of where everything is and how it's all matched and fit together. Then I have a in-wall HD. So that is under performance, I believe. HD in-wall, and that sits in here, about there roughly. So that's the 4 access points that I have in the house, in the homestead. You can then go and we can choose the cameras. And with the cameras, you can either choose the ones you've got again, or the ones that you want to see how the coverage would be. So I have a G4 Pro that sits out here. And then when you place the camera, you just turn there's this turquoise or teal angle here, and that is the direction of the camera. So I'll show you how that looks in just a minute in terms of graphics, but we just want to place these things first. And I then have a couple of G3 flexes. Oh yeah, because they're under value. It's a little bit confusing having these two different menus that don't really show both, but I'll have a flex that sits here near my front door that points that way, roughly. Then I have another flex that sits over here, pointing out to the garden, which is there. And then I have another flex up here, which is for the carport, and that kind of, sits like that, roughly, in terms of angle. Okay, so now I've placed most of my devices. There is cables as well, because you can so you can map out where the cabling go. There's also auto cable, which I tend to use because I don't really want to map out where the cabling go. It's not that important to me, but if it is important to you, you can then do that. So that does an auto cabling because everything comes from the switch, and that puts in the cables for you. It just goes a direct line. Obviously that's not where the cables are in my case, but good enough for now. I'll connect them to the existing 24U communications rack, as it's called, to my rack, my server cupboard. And I'll just click finish, and then that'll kind of link everything up for me. And that means now that I can go back to my rack menu here, and then this will then tell me that I have 9 out of 24 PoE ports used. And again, the power consumption goes up, gives you an idea of how much power you're using. It's kind of neat, kind of neat. Now the really cool thing is if I just close this menu here, and we then zoom out a little bit here, we put this in the middle. Down here under the legend, I guess, not the legend, but the switches here, you can put the coverage on. So now I can say, hey, I want to see my 2.4 gigahertz coverage. And that is the really cool bit. Now we get a sense of where the coverage is in the house. So in this case, you can tell that I haven't actually got much coverage in this area, which is my kitchen lounge sort of diner area. Now there is some coverage. Again, this is just an indication. This is not 100% accurate, but it gives me an idea of where the coverage is in the house. Now I don't have anywhere in the house that I don't have Wi-Fi coverage, but I do notice that the signal right here at the dinner table does diminish. It does go down a bit, especially if the door here is closed into this room here. Now I can also show the 5 gigahertz coverage, so that's obviously what you need to get the higher speed. If you have a gigabit connection, you do want to have good 5 gigahertz coverage for your devices as well. That becomes even more important, I guess, with Wi-Fi 6 when that becomes a standard. In here I can now see my 5 gigahertz coverage, and this is in fact true. I have tested it that if I am in this area here in the middle, my devices do go on 2.4 gigahertz pretty consistently. They are hardly ever on 5 gigahertz. So now that I know this, I can obviously add more access points to kind of figure out where I would like them. So if I say I have a spare Nano HD, if I want to go in and use that, here I can then try and say, well, if I could place it here in my kitchen, you can see instantly like the coverage gets improved there. This is the 5 gigahertz coverage. Obviously if I went back to 2.4 gigahertz, again it would improve dramatically. So that's maybe something I want to consider, is placing another access point there, just to kind of make sure that the coverage is good. So I don't have that right now, so I'm going to remove it, but you can do that. Alright, so once you've cabled the devices, you can't actually move them. So if I wanted to try and play around with, say, this particular device here, I would have to click on the cable, right click on it, remove the cable, and I can now move this around and see in real time where the coverage is going to be affected. Now this is kind of neat because you can place it just right in terms of what walls you have and where you put it. Now it is here on my house, so I'm not going to change that, but it's a really neat tool that you very quickly in real time can see where you would get the best coverage, or at least indicated best coverage. Now I just want to cable my access point back again. There we go. So now we've gone through the floor plan settings here. There's the different devices. If you have wall sockets, you can also place those. I have one right here, so I could just place that there. And then I can of course cable that as well. Here, use auto cable and it'll just hook it up for me. So you can place wall sockets as well, and that might be useful if you want to know how many ports you're using again and where the cables go. Now we've also gone through the rack, which is that menu there, and I can then click on the rack. It'll show up what the rack has, as we saw before. Here's the building, drawing the walls or drawing the rooms. You can actually build up your own as well. I would recommend drawing on a floor plan. It's much easier. And then there's the cabling menu as well. Now on the left we also have a topology. So this is just showing how things are connected. This could be useful if this is a design you're making and you're actually building a new network setup. You can see the topology here. Everything's connected to the 24 port switch. And then there is a materials list. So of course Unifi will like you to buy all this once you've set up your new network and found the right coverage. In this case, I'm in Australia. There is not a Unifi store in Australia, at least not yet. So I can't actually buy them. If you were in the US or in Europe, I would imagine that this would show you the price and just being able to buy it, because here's all the materials that you need, etc., etc. It would give you a total, and you could check out, and it would actually let you buy it directly through the design center. That's kind of neat. I'm not sure that is the right way to do it, but it is a way to do it. So that is the Unifi Design Center. It is a really neat tool. It's really quick once you have the floor plan to kind of get into it and figure out where things are and how to set it up. And I've actually found quite a lot of use for it. I have 2 other buildings that I need to cover with Wi-Fi, and I'm going to use this to try and figure out how that works. But I just love looking at this coverage map like this and give you some, you know, Wi-Fi goodness, and it gives you sort of a heat map that makes you warm and fuzzy, I guess. Oh, I did forget to show you one thing, the cameras. Again, you can show the camera angles on everything. You can move cameras to see what the coverage would be, and you can see here mine in this case what the coverage is. I might need some on the other side of the house if I want to watch the dogs or the llamas, who knows. But yeah, you can definitely use it for the cameras as well and see how you get coverage. Those are very accurate, the angles are very accurate on these, so that's definitely something you can use as well. But that is it. That is the Unifi Design Center, and I hope you like this video. Give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to my channel. I do a lot of these videos and I hope they're useful. Please comment with anything you might want to know, anything I've missed, anything I can do better, and I would love to get back to you. But see you next time. Thanks.